Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Lyle Kelman. He's the Deputy Program Manager for DOS at GDIT. Mr. Kelman, good to have you with us.
Hey, Tom, real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
And this is really a big program, and it's going to affect possibly every user there is in the Defense Department, both civilian and uniformed, as the years roll out. From your standpoint, what can people expect when they sign up and join up and get their agencies into this whole cloud collaborative program?
Well, Tom, I think the first aspect of the program that we really are trying to get folks to welcome is it will be an easier experience for them to manage, to have access. And in particular, it's going to drive the opportunity for better collaboration across the DoD. Currently, systems are separated by the military departments, the Army, Navy, Air Force. We've got what we call the fourth estate, which are all of those support agencies within the DoD. DISA itself is considered one of the support agencies. And so it's difficult for folks to collaborate. It's difficult to find counterparts in other agencies. And so as we roll out DOS and we get it up and running, we're going to have a global directory. It'll be easier to find folks, and it'll be folks will have easier access to the information that's going to be out there. And it's going to help the government also cut costs because there won't be the need to have systems scattered throughout the United States in data centers. It will be centrally located, centrally protected, and the access to it will be centrally controlled through better security.
And if you look at the personnel aspect of this in all of the defense agencies and the armed services, there are all these CIOs, there are all of these technical staffs, network operations staffs. They all operate email systems, they operate directories and subdirectories and user directories and so on. For those people, how will life change when their agency goes to a single centralized cloud location for all of these tools?
Well, I don't want to make it sound as if everything becomes super simple and super easy, but it will be easier, it will be better, and it'll be more consistent. The naming conventions will be more consistent, the compliance will be consolidated, standardized. So as you look at the current systems today, if something gets changed, and there's a lot of variables that can affect an end user's device, when one of those variables change, it can really just be a wave across the entire environment. And what happens when we centralize and we're more consistent, that susceptibility to unexpected changes is going to go down. And the standardization will allow folks to maintain a consistency regardless of what agency they're in. So as folks move from agency to agency throughout the DoD, it'll allow them to get up to speed quicker.
All right. And you mentioned security. And of course, that's the top of mind consideration for every federal system that's deployed, every DoD systems that's deployed. What is your role in the whole security setup? And maybe describe the security schema around the DOS offerings coming ultimately from Microsoft, but ending up on people's individual desks.
Right. So it's a great question. And how will security become better, more secure, if you will? Currently, the US Cyber is looking at a zero trust environment. Our biggest challenge is just protecting our data. It's why IL5, Impact Level 5, is a standalone cloud offering from Microsoft. You and I, when we're at home, we have access to what's called Impact Layer 2. It's IL2. It's what the DoD is currently using for their CVR, which is their current teams collaboration environment. Well, the security isn't as high there, and so you have to use passwords to get access to the system. There is a multi-factor authentication capability. But when you move up to IL5, what happens is we now help support the use of the derived credential, which is on a CAC card. So fortunately, there won't be as much of a need for passwords and folks forgetting their passwords or folks writing those passwords probably where they shouldn't. With that said, we'll be able to provide better security that way. In addition, when we look at the security, more importantly, we'll be more responsive to changes in security. Currently, we have this process by which we have to follow policy. So we move at the speed of policy. The challenge is technology doesn't wait for policy. So we can now use policy as a code, if you will. And as changes are made, those changes then can be updated in an evergreening environment. And evergreening is what Microsoft uses to update the versions of their software. There's no longer here's a patch, put your patch in. Microsoft now evergreens. They send out the updates and the updates just take effect. This will make more streamlined. And in the past, what would happen is people would get behind on their security patching. And we do an audit and they would be anywhere from 2 to 3 months behind because now it's downtime. I got to take the system down. I got to make it not available for everybody. I've got to find a window in which I can put my patches. A lot of that will be diminished greatly as we move forward to this cloud environment that allows us to move and respond at the speed of technology. And that's what we're looking forward to. And that's what we're hoping folks are going to really enjoy once we get the system up and running.
And just a quick follow up on the IL2 versus IL5, CVR environments is going to go away and sunset, according to DISA, as they move more people onto DOS. And that was kind of a temporary, I guess, partly in response to the COVID situation. But the good irony here is that even though the security standards will be at a higher level using the CAC card, as you mentioned, it sounds like the user experience will be somewhat simpler because they don't have to have all these authentication factors to memorize. The CAC card becomes the secret there.
Correct, and that again, when and I have the ability to use CVR, and it's a fantastic project. The DoD really appreciated the fact that Microsoft made it available. It will sunset. It's currently scheduled to be sunsetted June 15th of this year. And what we're doing now is facilitating organizations getting their licensing, getting established in the cloud, and then we will enable those licenses. And when we do, those licenses then enable the use of Teams. A difference that how the system has matured is in the past, you had to move the mailbox, and then you turned on the license, and then you got all of the suite available to you. Microsoft has gone to great lengths to make the system more flexible. And I came from a program that managed the migration for the Navy. So back in September, as an example, we were able to implement, turn the licenses on first, enable Teams, and because back then we thought CVR was going to sunset in September. So we were preparing to enable Teams in the IL5 environment in anticipation of that sunset date. We weren't ready, so they moved it to June 15th. But what we were able to do was turn on 60,000 licenses in a couple days. And then we set up our migration schedule based on who had a active license. And we flipped the paradigm for how we migrated users. It makes it more flexible. It allows us to bring folks onto the system faster. Migrations are very limited based upon network bandwidth, availability of the infrastructure. Turning on a license, frankly, is just a script. We turn the licenses on, we make the end users available. Our biggest challenge is making sure that our service desks know we're going to suddenly turn on all that capability at once. So we don't turn them all on at once because we flood our service desks, because folks do have questions. It's not that the system doesn't work. Sometimes they have questions. Sometimes they don't read all the instructions, and things don't go as perfectly as we had thought. So it's an interesting aspect, but we are looking forward to being able to help folks get to IL5 in anticipation of CVR.
So this is really a big step in that long journey away from sys administrators running around sticking CDs in everybody's PC to get them up to date, or sending them around to ships or airplanes. Now it's airplane hangars. It's all subscription, and it's all done in the cloud and ready there when you are.
And this lays the groundwork for the ability for the rest of the organization. So this is the Office suite. So your Outlook, your Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Teams, SharePoint, your OneDrive. Yes. However, there's an awful lot of other applications. The actual device that you're running on is going to run on Win 10. That isn't currently part of the DOS offering, but we're now starting to realize we need to expand that ease of use to the rest of software applications, devices within the DoD. So this lays the groundwork, gets folks used to what's it mean to be in the cloud, and that's what we're excited about. Is that we're going to change the way people work for the better. We're going to improve productivity. We believe effectiveness and efficiencies. So we're excited about it.
We're speaking with Lyle Kelman. He's the Deputy Program Manager for DOS at GDIT. And what do you advise agencies to do in terms of just communicating with employees on what to expect and setting their expectations? Because, anytime there's a new suite and a new system for getting at it deployed, there's going to be, as you said, those questions, and people won't maybe read all the instructions. So it seems like a little groundwork might be necessary before your agency just gets dragged into this.
So that is far and away one of our number one priorities. This is the third major rollout of 365 that I've had the honor of being able to participate in. We did it for the Ministry of Defense in Great Britain. We've done it for the Navy. And the way you address that is you literally start at T minus 60 days out. You start letting folks know it's coming. And then you let them know at T minus 30, T minus 14, T minus 7. And there's a series of graduated information, graduated packets of information to get them used to. So is there going to be a look and feel? In our case, because they're on Win 10, the look and feel to the end user doesn't really change. And that's a good thing. But some of the things they will see within their mailbox will change. So we first tell them, you're going to the system. This is what the system is going to make available. These are the subtle changes you're going to see. Then as we get closer, we tell them what to expect, and we reinforce it 2 or 3 times before the actual migration. There's things that some folks need to do. We found that delegation for the VIPs, you have to turn all that off as an example, and then you have to reestablish your delegation of your calendars, access to your mailbox. You have to turn that off, but then you reestablish it after you migrate. If you don't do that, it's not the greatest experience. And so we've learned to make sure that we treat the folks who have those kind of requirements. We give them a little extra communication. We then also, when we first started, which we found was just a little bit of a disaster, great learning point, do not publish a 30-page guide. People won't read it. So we figured out, how do you get the key points in a two-page PDF, and you just keep sending it to them. Have you read it? Really recommend you read it. And we find that now the number of calls for folks that call the service desk and just had trouble reading the guide out of the gate with our initial users, we learned a tremendous amount. And so it's, how do we automate more as a part of the experience? And then how do we clearly articulate what to expect and what the end user needs to do? And we're continuing to improve that, so it's more and more and more automated. It's not quite to the point where you come in, you log on, and everything's done, but there are a few steps that have to be executed by the end user, and we give very specific guidance on how to do that. It's a couple points and click. You have to establish and sign in the first time, but once you do that, system's up and running, and frankly, they don't notice the difference, and they love the fact that if nothing else, you no longer need to archive into PST files. Your mailbox is no longer 2 gigabytes, it's 100 gigabytes. And you have now a terabyte of storage available in the cloud.
Yeah, and
So
that was my next question actually, because a terabyte seems like a lot, and 100 gigabytes of email. Well, in my case, I'm getting in my company, I'm getting warnings all the time. Clear out some email. And do you recommend that agencies do that kind of thorough tossing before people just say, "Well, I've got a terabyte. What the heck?" Because it does have a way of filling up.
it does, and it's another sort of a humorous story. In the in when I was in England, we moved someone, and it took an exorbitant amount of time to move this one mailbox, and we just couldn't figure out why. And the reason was this individual, while he moved things into his deleted folder, he never emptied the folder. So it was about 10 years worth of email. And it was all in, and we didn't see it because it was in the deleted folder. And so we sent out a little note and said, so when you move from one house to another house, do you have the movers take the trash, or do you just throw the trash out? So we've sort of asked folks, ensure you empty your deleted folder. Look at your archive. Are there things you really do need? And if you can help minimize the size of your mailbox, you'll have a better experience. But yes, to your point, terabyte is a lot. We can move it. It does. The bigger the repository for the information, it's simple math. The bigger it is, the longer it can take, because you can't, we've got our pipes. Our pipes are fixed size, but we have been working with the end users, and they've been very responsive because they want it to work, and that's the good news. They're looking forward to it.
Well, anyone that's ever lived in the country knows, yes, you can flush your toilet for 10 years, but some days you got to get to that septic tank and empty that out. Or it's gonna let you know it's there. All
I'm
right,
not
and
going to use the septic tank example.
I don't think
I
I
like
don't think
don't have the movers grab the trash can full of trash. I
that's
don't
right.
know, but
And
it's good.
and of course, there are a large number of users, and they all have different characteristics, but they do have different roles and different responsibilities and different ways they work. Is how customizable is an individual's account within DOS, and or is it by the work group, or how does that all work? And how can you tailor things to what people need?
So it's interesting you bring that up. From a mailbox perspective, the good news is in the current, having run the on-prem system for mailboxes, and so it's a good place to be running the on-prem and running the cloud at the same time. I got to be able to look at the two systems next to each other. And the beauty of moving to the cloud is that in the past, VIP's got a bigger mailbox. Now they still filled it up. They just took longer to fill it up. So they still had to develop those PST files. So from a mailbox perspective, there isn't, there doesn't need to be a difference. It's the same experience whether you're an E1 to an O10 from a large extent. The delegations are the things that change. And frankly, the delegation capabilities in the cloud are the same as they are on-prem. Where things change, which is really, really powerful, is teams that we've talked about. Because now you have teams groups, you have teams channels, you have that now ability to build these work groups, which now completely encourage that collaboration. And so to be able to do that makes it a very, very powerful tool. And that's where the customization, and that's where you make it work to your advantage. And that's why folks are embracing Teams as it's coming out now. And Teams runs on, and the beauty of the system, because folks sometimes get a little confused. I just want to add this as a clarification. When you look at SharePoint, SharePoint is a filing system. And so SharePoint is there, SharePoint's available. But on top, and so our goal is to help them move the on-prem stores up to the cloud, SharePoint Online. And that's part of DOS also. But more importantly, so folks are clear, is that OneDrive runs on SharePoint and Teams runs on SharePoint. It's just, it becomes your individual, I'm holding my air quotes, it becomes your individual SharePoint. So what's really important about that from a customization perspective is the efficiencies of not having to send documents. You just send the link. And so now the bandwidth requirements of pushing all those documents out, if it's a 3 meg file, now folks can choose, do I really need to look at that file? So with Teams, you can have files that are restricted to your group. You can open up and make accessible things on your OneDrive. You can collaborate right on your OneDrive as long as you've made that link available to whoever you're collaborating with. And it all runs on SharePoint. So that's why the system is so powerful, is that ability to really enable the collaboration.
My guest is Lyle Kelman. He's the Deputy Program Manager for DOS at GDIT. And let's talk about mobile users for a moment and those that might be working outside of the DoD, for example. They still need that access, and we've seen this in the pandemic pretty much, universal basis. How does DOS accommodate those folks?
So as we will accommodate them. Currently, mobile devices are available. I can use the experience I had working with the Navy, working with the Ministry of Defense. So mobile devices are available. Uh, Currently, most folks are using BlackBerry with Purebred, and Purebred is how you get your derived credentials. So again, it's through what's on your CAC card. That's your derived credential that enables it. The challenge is that BlackBerry is different than Microsoft. But Microsoft has a tool called Intune, and the DoD is now trying to understand what does the future look like. Intune is required to interface with the cloud, and it has to do with it is proprietary. Microsoft does have to protect their intellectual property. So how Intune is going to interface with the mobile current device management, there's two aspects. There's device management and there's authentication. So we're going to integrate Intune to help with the authentication, and then the government will give us direction. Are we going to move off of BlackBerry? We're going to leave BlackBerry where it is. There is the ability to use Microsoft tools, but there are some limiting factors, and we're going to do the analysis on now that to take the government to the future on mobile devices. And then your second point was inside, outside of the DoD. So in response to COVID, Microsoft already had a construct called Flow 3. And Flow 3 was that outside of that dedicated secure network, how do we enable access? Working with US Cyber, US Cyber had this Zero Trust initiative. It's in three phases. The first one was outside the DoD for a GFE piece of equipment. So if you are someplace where you don't have that access, they enabled that. And when they did that, the beauty of it is that it laid the foundation for this global directory. It laid the foundation for the cross-tenant access. And Microsoft actually has a couple new tools out that are going to help with that. So that was the first step. So they established that it was primarily to enable the Corps of Engineers in their response to COVID as they were building emergency hospitals. All of us had to um, implement and harden our tenants. So in particular, so that was sort of how we crawled. So we enabled the Air Force, the Army Corps of Engineers, and then everybody else had to turn it off. So it was made available to the Army, proof of concept, Army Corps of Engineers. Now they are putting it in place across the DoD, across all the tenants. Then we're going to do the mobile devices. Mobile devices will be next. That's where Intune is going to get introduced. And then finally, we will introduce a bring your own approved device. Not necessarily any device. So there'll be some sort of vetting of the devices that will be allowed to connect to the system. So it's three phases. We're going to crawl, we'll walk, and we'll run.
And in the minute we have left, just your sense of whether the DoD will have both greater security externally, but be able to collaborate more readily internally.
I would say yes. The cloud versus on-prem, I think they're equally as secure. They're secure in different ways. We don't want to lose sight that Microsoft went to a great deal of trouble to set up Impact Level 5 in accordance with government regulations to make this secure environment. So we very strictly control who can get access to the system. And to get access to the system is you have to have availability to validate your persona. That persona is through that card. So, and first you got to be able to get to it. Then you got to be able to authenticate. Then once you authenticate, you get the access. So I believe the security is going to be good. The nature of IL5 is very secure. It is a challenge because it's a higher level of security. We're going to have to be much more adaptive to changes because things are going to change as we
Sure.
move. And so it will be secure. They will have, it will help because of the consistency in the security. I think that's the biggest point. It's going to be more secure because we're going to be consistently secure against the entire end user population.
Our guest has been Lyle Kelman. He's the Deputy Program Manager for DOS at GDIT. Thanks so much. I'm Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. And let me now send you back to our main studio for more of DoD Cloud Exchange.